Okay. Hi everyone. Let's just get started. We have 1 hour for this session, and I don't even want to use all of that, right? So, welcome to a continuation of this week's topic, which is user research and common UX deliverables. For those of you that were able to join us in the call on Wednesday, I think I can see some names. Connie, you were there. Ola, you were there. Yeah, Samuel was there. Uh, I think I'm not sure. Hmm. Yeah, but sorry, those are the names that I recognize, right? It's nice to have you guys back. So we've covered the definition of UX research or user research. We've covered the subsets, we've covered the types, and then we've covered quite a number of methods that falls under the different types of UX research. The other part of this lesson is going to be common UX deliverables. And what we mean by this is that as product designers, I'm going to say product designers, for those of you that want to move on to being product designers, as product designers, you need to understand that your UI skills are just as important as your UX skills, right? That's why we're even teaching you user research, because user research also still kind of falls under UX. And that's why we also call it UX research sometimes, right? You need to understand that as a good product designer, that your work cuts across user interface and user experience, and that there are specific companies that you're going to join that have an already set structure that you must follow. There are companies that you would want to work with. Maybe they want to recruit you to work on their product, right? And then when you join, they are already going to tell you, okay, this is what we're expecting you to do. These are the things that we're expecting from you. And by that, I mean the deliverables that you're supposed to, deliver. And if you're not prepared for this, you might start looking at them and you might start saying something like, I'm a designer. I'm not, I'm just a designer and stuff like that. I'm not a project manager. I'm not a product manager. I'm just a designer. But these deliverables so we're about to talk about cuts across, it's not something that is meant, research and some items of UX are not things that are meant for the product managers alone. Sometimes, a lot of times, designers also have to chip in one way or another, right? So that's why we're going to be talking about these things. And hopefully, the time we have is going to be enough. And if you have any questions, you can just hold on to it till the end. All right, let me share my screen very quickly so we can dive right in. By the way, if there's any point where you can hear me, someone should please unmute and say something. And if you have questions, just hold them till we're done. Try to make it as straightforward as possible. All right. So let me share my screen now. Let's do, nope, there's the Figma. Yeah, cool. Okay, I'm sharing. Let me know where you can see my screen. By the way, I'm gonna need the verbal confirmation. I'm not saying I'm Zoom right now.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. All right. So back to what I said, we're focusing on common UX deliverables for today, and I've underlined that so that you see that's what we're doing. And without any more delays, I'm just gonna dive right in and we're gonna start talking about it. Okay, so when you think deliverables are things that you're supposed to also bring to the table when you're working with products, right? The first thing we're going to talk about, and by the way, this list that we're working with is conservative. It's not we are not saying these are the only UX deliverables there are in the world. We're just saying these are the major ones that we're going to cover. You can always read up more and expand your horizon later on. But yeah, the first thing is business goals and technical specifications. Now, it's very easy for us as designers to say that, oh, business goals, that's the job of the stakeholder, the product managers, technical specification. Stakeholder is supposed to tell us what they want now. We the ones that are going to tell them. While in reality, knowing these things helps you design better products. So think about it in a way. You want to work on a product, right? And you don't know what the goals of the business are. You don't know why they want to be the product. I remember when we dove into UX research the first time, we're talking about you need to understand what the goal is. You need to understand what you're designing, why you're designing for, why you're designing that thing. Do people actually need this? There are a lot of there are a lot of aspects that needs to be covered before you even start designing. So that's why understanding the business goals and technical specification is one of the very important deliverables for you as a product designer, because when you do this, number one, you're going to be able to deliver more solutions, and two, you're going to prove to the stakeholder and the team that you actually know what you're doing. You're here for them. You're here to make it work, but you're not just here to design and go, because a lot of people just want to design and go, right? But stakeholders that want to build tangible products don't want people like that. That's why sometimes before you even join teams, they're already sharing documents with you. They're already telling you, oh, this is what we're trying to do. I've even been in meetings sometimes where they're telling me their 10 years goals, 5 years. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I understand why you're doing this, but can we just stick with what we're trying to do for now, not what we are going to do in the future, right? But when you talk about this, when you hear these people talk about their plans, they're always very excited, right? So they need to see that excitement in you too, and you also actively need to be engaged in this process. You need to understand the business goals, and you need to be able to write out the specifications. So for instance, if you're designing, right, what's the assurance that what you're designing is going to be implementable? Like, how are you sure that it's going to be implementable if you don't know anything, any technical thing about products? Right. So for instance, if I'm building a product right now, I know that, oh, if I design it this way, it's going to be, front end is going to be able, front end is going to be able to do this, back end is going to be able to do this. But if I design it this way, it might be a problem for for engineering, because engineering will not be able to get this right. Engineering cannot make this responsive on mobile. So all those technical specifications, and then things like, oh, what third-party applications would we need to use? What frameworks? Like, how would we even make it work? You actually need to ask yourself this question so you can design better products that work, because if you don't, then you just be designing. That's why in some cases you see some designers work on products, and then after they've worked on it and they've gone and the engineers are working on it, they now have to start iterating that design. That's because the initial designer that did the work did not think about this part. They did not think about the engineering part. Why? So it doesn't need this. When you're working on this and you're creating a document, it doesn't need to be more than one page, right? Just describe the core of what you're doing, why, and how, right? So you've done some thinking, you've done some research and everything. Create a documentation of your own. But this is what we are doing. This is how we are doing it. And this is why we are doing it. Just for you, for starters, right? And you can also share that with the team, so that if they have any reservations or any additions or subtractions, they can do that. But understanding business goals and technical specifications is one very important aspect of is one very important UX deliverable that you need to wrap your head around. Then we have competitive analysis reports. Now, we've talked about competitive analysis before on Wednesday. And basically, what we're saying here is that you need to have researched your competitors, right? You need to identify them. You need to evaluate their strategies. You need to know their strengths and weaknesses, so that you can weigh that in relative to your own product. So if I'm working on a new product, for instance, right, I'm not just going to start designing. The first thing I do is start Googling, like, who are the other people in this field? Who are the other people in this field in the same vicinity as me? Who are the other people in this field in the same continent? Who are the other people in this field in the world, right? You need to know these things. And once you figured out the names of these companies or these organizations, you now research about them, right? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? What are the complaints people have about them the most? Once you have all these, you put them in your own documents and you make a proper competitive analysis report, where you can see an example that I'm giving here, where we have they're using Airtable here, right? But you can also use Google Docs if you want, or Google Slides, whatever, right? But just make a list, make a table and put all these organizations, all these brands side by side, and identify their strengths and weaknesses. So for instance, if your own products, if your competitors are WhatsApp and GroupMe, like we have on this example you're seeing in my screen, then you can just say, oh, when it comes to chatting, WhatsApp has great functionality, GroupMe doesn't have great functionality, right? When it comes to voice call, WhatsApp has terrible functionality, GroupMe has great functionality, right? And you can indicate those with check marks. So what this does is that by the time you're done, you can see what each of them are lacking, and you'll be able to add those features in your own product quite easily. And that's going to make your own product come out better and on top, because while these guys are struggling, you've already figured out what they were doing wrong, and you'll be able to attend to the problems that their own customers are complaining about. So that way you can drive engagement for yours. It's as simple as that, right? So competitive analysis reports is another thing that we need to wrap our heads around. And three, this one should be quite popular, I mean, around already, right? But three is user personas, and let's just stick with user personas, right? And basically, you should have seen this in case studies of designers around. So basically, designers need to be able to make sure stakeholders understand the needs of the product. Right? That's part of our job, as weird as it might sound. It's part of our job to make sure that, look, I need you to understand what you're trying to build, because if you don't, then we're just going to end up building something that don't work, right? So what creating user personas does is that it helps to communicate user behaviors and pattern, right? And it basically helps us ideate the basically helps us ideate the best ways to understand or put ourselves in the shoes of our users. So think about it this way. I'm about to build a product that maybe Gen Zs can use to, maybe that Gen Zs used to chat or something like that, or basically a product for millennials, something like that, right? It's going to be easier for me to be able to design a flow if I have a sample idea of who my users are. So what user personas does is that I take an imaginary person and I give them a real life scenario. I can say, okay, let's say somebody's name, let's imagine someone named John Doe, right? And just for the sake of this product I'm about to build, and I give John Doe a personality. I'm like, okay, John Doe is a 45 years old man. He works at an investment firm. He's based in Ghana, right? And in his company, he's responsible for tackling um, um, issues with the SEC or with the IRS, right? And when he's not doing that, when he's home, he loves skiing, he loves swimming. He has a wife, he has 2 kids, right? You're giving these people actual scenarios because you're designing for real life people. You're designing for humans. So if you don't have an idea, or if you don't have a tangible representation of who your users are going to be, then you're only going to be designing vaguely. But when I know that I'm designing for John Doe and he's 45 years old, I obviously know that using Gen Z language is not going to work for someone like that. I obviously know that these guys or these people with age 45 and above, they're not interested in a lot of the apps or a lot of the slangs or whatever that newer generations are interested in. These guys are more rooted in the old ways, right? So whatever I'm doing, whatever I'm building, however my flow is going to be, it needs to be tailored to them, right? And I can have, and by the way, when you're creating user personas, you create for more than one person, right? And I can have another one for a lady, let's say Jane White, like we have here, and then she's a media strategist. She's 38 years old. Of course, she's still like close to the 45 years old range. So what you want to do is that even though you're designing for millennials and all, you want to add a variety. You want to spice things up. You want to have different personas, right? So you have for someone that's 45, you have for someone that's 38. You can say the 45 years old person is an extrovert, while the 38 years old person is an introvert. Because basically, there are different categories of people that fall under the millennial group, right? Not everyone who's a millennial is an extrovert. Some of them are introverts, right? Some of them are a mix of both, right? So when I'm designing products for millennials in general, I need to be able to identify the subset of people that fall under that category. So that's what user personas does, right? It gives you a tangible idea of the people you are designing for, right? So that when you're working on your flow and you're actually putting the pieces together, it is going to work. Like it's going to work. It's going to feel like you're actually designing for people because you have a sample idea of the people that you're working with in your mind, and you have it on paper, not just in your mind. Like this is clear. You can always go back to this product document and see, okay, why did I even put this button here? Who are my users again? Right? And then you go back to that document and you're like, oh, okay, I can see. So if John Baker is someone that doesn't like to press his phone a lot, what's the assurance that using this color would attract him to press his phone more? Stuff like that. So that's why user personas are important. Then we have sitemap and information architecture. Now, you probably should have heard about information architecture or sitemap before now, but if you've not, that's not a problem really. So basically, excuse me, a sitemap is like, let's call it an organized structure, right? Containing all the information of a digital product. Let's put it that way. So imagine that I want to build a product, right? So what the sitemap does for me generally is that it helps me know how my product is going to be structured or how my site is going to be structured. Simply put. So if I'm working on, let's say, a website, and it's going to be a multi-page website that has many functionalities and everything like that. So with the sitemap and my information architecture, I'm going to have a structure, and I'm going to have a flow. Let's imagine it that way, right? That is going to guide, or that's going to act like a framework for my build. So it's in the sitemap that will now see something like, oh, there's going to be a home page, and then from the home page we can navigate to the business page. From the home page we can navigate to the careers page. From the home page we can navigate to the contact page. From the home page we can navigate to the blog, right? The sitemap is going to tell us that, right? Why the information architecture more or less tells us or shows us how the information is going to be structured. So right now, I said the sitemap, you've been able to group, you'll be able to have a structure. I'm saying from this home page, a line is going directly to the blog, a line is going directly to contact. That's like the map. But information architecture determines how the information is structured. Okay, so on the home page, for instance, what comes first? Right? What are the information people are getting? Like, how do we structure this information? So maybe we are saying, oh, at the home page, the first section that they're going to see is going to be the hero. And from the hero, maybe we have partners. The question is now, why should the list of our partners come next? Like, why? Do you understand? So that's what information architecture does. So from when you're structuring your information architecture, you can now decide, okay, instead of making partners come next, why not make why we're important come next? So after the home page, you have a section that now says why us, and then we have a section that now says this is what people say, and now we have a section that now says this is what we do, and then we have a section that now says look at see our track record. Do you understand? So it is when you're working on your information architecture that you put those structures together. So bear in mind, the sitemap, first of all, is I'm dumbing this down as much as I can, right? So the sitemap is the navigation of people across your product from this page to that page, from that page to this page, from this page to that page, right? And then information architecture is how the information on each and every single one of those pages is going to be structured. What are they saying first? What are they saying last? What are they saying this first? What are they saying this second? Stuff like that. So that's like a simple way of putting it, right? There are a lot more complex explanations out there, but just keep it at the back of your mind that you're going to be fine wherever it is that you need to work on the sitemap or information architecture. Now we have, and after that we have the experience maps and user journey or user flow. And I know for a fact that we've been talking about user flow since day one. So now the question is, what are they? And coming from the fact that we just talked about sitemap and information architecture, I know this might get confusing, but let's put it this way, right? Your experience map is like a visual representation that shows or that illustrates your users' flows within your product. So it's more like you are putting their goals, their needs, the time that they are going to spend, their thoughts, their feelings, and their reactions. You're putting those things into a visual form, right? So instead of just saying, oh, people will go from, or users will go from the home page to the about page, from the about page to this page. No, instead of just saying that, or just saying these are the sections that you're going to see, you're actually walking through their process. So that's where you hear things like, oh, the user signs into the app, user clicks on this button to log in, user waits for a few seconds for it to load, and then the user is now taken to, do you understand? User is now taken to this page, to the next page, where they see the buttons to perform A, B, C, X, Y, Z action. If the user clicks on the A button, user now gets taken to this page so that they will do this before they move on to this. So your user journey, right, is a breakdown of the step, the granular breakdown of the steps. That's what user journey is, right? It's the granular breakdown of the steps. So while we have a higher overview breakdown like the sitemap and information architecture, the user journey is where you actually sit down and say, look, what are these people thinking? And what are these people saying? How are these people going to, how are they feeling? How are they going to react? What are the expectations? What are the needs? What are their goals, right? So that's where you break it down. Like that's why you break it down completely and you say, okay, when they are here, they click on this to do this, and then they click on this to do that with a more detailed, explanation. right? Um, Always keep it at the back of your mind that the primary the primary goal here is for you to solve problems for them, right? So while it's important that you've already set up your sitemap and information architecture, you have to know that in order for you to effectively solve those problems, you need to now break your flows, break the steps down so that you can you can have a microscopic view of each step and really be able to determine if those steps are going to work or not. So if you're saying, oh, when the user clicks the app, the splash screen that comes up with a button that says proceed, and the users click proceed to go to the next page where they see the onboarding flows, all those, oh, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. All right. And after those ones, they see a button that tells them, or they see buttons that tells them that you can either skip or you can get started. Now the question is, after you've worked out those flow, you can now start asking yourself, okay, when they click to open the app, why do they have to first see a splash screen that has a button that they have to click to proceed to the next step? Why not just do it in such a way that after when you click to open the app and the splash screen loads, it automatically navigates to the next page by itself. You don't have to click. Basically, I'm trying to reduce the actions that they're going to perform just so that we can save them some microseconds. Now, you can say microseconds are, relatively small. Why are we doing that? But bear it in mind that if you can save microseconds on each steps throughout your flow, at the end of the day, you'd have saved them some time. That time that you save them might not be important to you, but put yourself in their shoes of people that are busy and have a lot of things to do, and millions of apps are vying for their attention. You can be that app that stands out by saving them some seconds. That's how it works, right? So that's why mapping out your user journey, user flow is important, because it helps you see it helps you see at a granular level what exactly you're expecting your users to do, what exactly they're going to be feeling, and how you can solve those problems for them. Okay. So then we have VX wireframes. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because it's wireframes. We're talking about them for a while. But this is where you now actually, after you've done your plenty research, you now actually start putting things together. Okay, I have a flow. These are my flow is going to be. This is how the information architecture. These are my site is going to be structured. This is how my product is going to be structured. Now let me start putting the building blocks together so that I'm going to have an actual visual representation of the structure of my product. That's where the wireframes comes in, and then I start bringing in boxes and shapes and maybe text just to note and images just to identify that, okay, this is this section that I was talking about, this is that button that I was talking about that they're going to click, this is that next section that they are going to see, this is that skip button that they're going to use to skip this is the menu button that they're going to use to review menus and the likes of that. So that's where wireframes comes in. And basically why wireframes are also important, right, is that they're like the blueprints of your product. Let's call it that. They are the blueprints of a product. They are the foundation, right, of the actual build, of the actual design. And they are what forms the primary layout. So with a wireframe, it becomes clearer what you're trying to achieve. Everything we've been doing before now has been, okay, let's ideate, let's figure out, let's try to see, but right now, when you get to the wireframe section, this is the actual part where you now say, okay, let's create a blueprint, let's create a foundation. And can a house stand without a foundation? No. So that's the same way your product cannot stand without a foundation, right? So this is where you bring in you frame your structure, you bring in leveraging on your information architecture, you bring in content, you bring in the shapes, you ideate the functionalities, right? A lot of designers enjoy this process, why some don't. But whether you're the type that enjoys it or don't or not, before now, you need to start learning to enjoy it because you can't escape it. At some point in your career, you're definitely gonna have to do them, or at many points in your career. So yeah, this is the point where you start bringing structures, right? So wireframes are like the foundations, they're like the blueprints. They're what guides your next couple of design decisions. And then we have interactive prototypes. Now, we've not covered any topic on prototyping before, but we are going to, right? And basically, this is another important deliverable because prototyping brings your product to life. Okay. Think about it this way. I've designed something. No matter how good looking your product is, it's still very easy to misunderstand the flow. It's very easy to misunderstand the process. So with prototyping, what you are now able to do is that you're telling people that, look, this is what I've designed. I understand this, but I want you to actually experience it like the product is live, even though it's not live yet. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you this, and every single action you perform on every single page is going to lead to a subsequent action. So unlike before, where I might just show you my Figma design, then you're looking through everything, you're like, oh, this is fine. Oh, where would this lead to? And then I have to click, I have to pan my screen, move all the way to the right to see where this button leads. No, prototyping is saying that, you know what, that's obsolete. Don't do that anymore. With this, on just this single page, you can navigate through every aspect of the product and actually experience it, right? And there are times where you work with companies and they tell you, and you don't necessarily have to prototype as much, but there are some companies that you're going to work with that at every point, when you guys are ideating and adding new features, you guys are testing, and then you're having to prototype every single one of those things. So yes, it can get hectic, but once you get the hang of it and once you get used to it, it's going to be relatively easier for you. So prototyping is important. It helps people actually experience your app how you intended it, right? Because if I don't create a prototype that shows you, excuse me, if I don't create a product that shows you that this particular button will lead you somewhere, there's a high chance that when you are going through the site on your own, you probably wouldn't know that this is where that button is supposed to lead. Now, before we also proceed, there are different methods of, of prototyping, right? You can either prototype the regular way we know in Figma, where you add actions to each button and then people can click through, or a more subtle kinds of prototype would be with connecting arrows. I don't know if you've seen that before, but look on your screen right now. See the way this arrow is pointing to, I mean, this arrow is telling us that if you click on this card, it's going to lead you here. If you click on this button here, it's going to lead you here. So there are minimal prototype methods like that, where you just indicate where everything is going to lead to with arrows. I don't necessarily have to go into Figma to start dragging, those webs around. And obviously, some companies allow this, right? Because I mean, think about it, it's relatively easier for you to do, but it's not that easy for the users to experience. So if you're doing something like this, it should be for you, not for them. If you're doing things for your stakeholders, your team, your users to test out, they probably just want to stick with the regular prototyping method where they can click through and experience the app properly. All right. So yeah, that is interactive prototyping, right? And then so you would know that before we came here, we had talked about UX wireframes. Now we are talking about interactive prototypes. So basically, we structure these points in such a way that it follows the normal design flow, right? So you've worked on a wireframe and then you want to share with your stakeholders. Fine, you can share them by connecting the points with arrows, right? But you can also do that by, I'm talking wireframes for instance, you can also do that by prototyping. So yes, you prototype wireframes, right? You prototype wireframes. And think about it this way: imagine that you've worked on a product and then you prototype the wireframe so that the stakeholders can click to and experience it, and then they approved it. When you're coming back to work on your high fidelity design, you literally don't have to break the structure of anything. You don't have to break the structure of your site. You don't have to break the structure of your prototypes that you've created. All you have to do is start replacing those contents with actual images, actual texts, change the font sizes, because you've done that already and the structure has been approved, right? So yes, prototyping comes in different aspects. Some prototypes are necessary when you've created the wireframes, and prototypes are also necessary after you've done your visual designs, the high fidelity designs, right? So don't think that, oh, prototyping is just for when I've done high fidelity design, that's not prototype. No, the reason why most people do it at that point is that is the point where they share their designs to the public. Normally, when people share prototypes, you notice that it's always high fidelity designs. It's because they did the wireframe on their own in their backend. They did everything. They did their research and everything. So, and they had no intention of sharing those wireframes to the public. That's why they did not prototype those wireframes. If they were going to share those wireframes to the public to experience and actually gather feedback, then they would have had to, prototype the wireframe. But now that they didn't prototype the wireframe, and we are down to and they've done the UI designs, they are ready to share that, then it now makes sense for them to prototype that. All right. So that brings us to the next step, which is the visual design. And basically, this is where you are expected, we're talking about UX deliverables. This is where you're expected to actually bring the designs to make it visual, like add actual design properties to your work, right? Give it colors, give it actual images, different use of hierarchy, different font sizes, consistencies in everything. Like basically, this is where you do your I5. Wireframe is structure. visual design is the build. So wireframe is the foundation and visual design is the house, right? Visual design is also your high fidelity design. Just call it visual design because basically in the layman terms is what you see, it's what you can relate with. It's the actual design that is, that is relatable, right? So this is where you get a style guide, create a style guide, create a proper product system or design system and use components from those style guides and those design systems to form your visuals. Yeah, this is what comes next after your wireframes have been approved, right? And then you're moving on. Yeah, I don't think I need to spend a lot of time because we already know what visual design is. It's basically the design you're doing today. It's what you see, it's what people see and they understand, right? After your wireframe. And then we have number 9, which is style guide and specifications for developers. Now, throughout the design process, there are some steps that people find enjoyable and other steps that people don't find enjoyable. This, my friends, is that step that people don't find enjoyable because documentation is hard. Documentation is very, very hard. Nobody wants to do it. Even I still struggle with it sometimes, right? But the reason why I'm able to escape from that a bit is that now I'm the one building my works, like I'm designing and I'm building. So I don't necessarily have to do a lot of handoffs to devs where they'll be requesting things from me. But before now, when you're done, you have to create a documentation for devs telling them that, look, this is the product, these are the rules, these are the guidelines, right? So here to here, the spacing for paddings like this, the spacing should not be more than 30 pixels. For margins like this, the spacing should not be more than 80 pixels, right? For this, it should not be more than this. For that, it should not be more than that. Definitely use this style for this style. Basically, you're sharing your style guide with them, but you might have to share it with explanations because they might not understand, right? Excuse me. So they might not understand. So you would want to add short form explanations. And if you guys, for those who are the on the call on Wednesday, when I was using closer to the end when we were wrapping up, I was sharing a particular design that I was tasked to implement, and I was showing how they put sticky cards there and added notes for me, right? That, look, here, this is what needs to be done. Here, this is what that needs to be done. That's something like what we're talking about. So you have to create documentation why you did this, what you're expecting them to do, the consistency that you're expecting from them. Everything needs to be well detailed so that they would be able to implement pixel perfect design. Now, this is not a very enjoyable process, but it's necessary, right? And there are tools out there that people use to do this. One of the most common tools that people use for this documentation aspect is Zeppelin. I personally don't use Zeppelin, but I've heard a lot of good things about Zeppelin. So maybe at some point you might check out Zeppelin and everything. But yes, one of the steps that is very, very important after you've designed or one of the deliverables that is important for you as a product designer is creating specification for developers. You need to make yourself available for them. You need to specify that, oh, this is that is that, right? So even down to it's very easy when you're designing where you just design things and then you move on, right? Maybe you're designing a form, a contact form, and then you just put, oh, this is what happens when they enter the form, this is what happens when they submit the form, right? But the question is now, what happens when they input a wrong email, right? What happens when network misbehaves and the form does not load? Do you get what happens? How does the cursor actually indicate when they are typing? Like, how does that cursor move? Is there a particular design you want for that? So there are different aspects of the design system or your design structure that needs to be worked on for the developers to be able to do their work effectively. That's why it's important. That's why it's important that as you're designing with a structure so that when you're done and you're giving developers the documentation, it doesn't come back to be like excess work for you, right? And that's why we've said things like from your wireframe, your structure should be clear. When you're creating your style guide, design system, make sure that everything is structured and be consistent with your use of components, right? Don't use one here and you're changing it here and you're changing it here, because that way, if you want to make changes across your site, you have to go into each and every one of those screens. Imagine that you have 500. I was, my sister was asking me a while back, a couple of days ago, that, oh, how many screens do you think would be in a mobile app if you're trying to build it? And then I was like, And then she's like, tell me now, is it like 100? Then I laughed and I opened one of the current product that we're working on, right? The product is it's a live product actually. Then I opened, Figma allows you to add multiple pages. So what we've done is that we've categorized each flow of that app into those pages. I had like, I think 15, 20 pages in that, right? And I opened the first one and then we started counting. On the first one alone, we had, was it close to 300? All right. 300 screens in just the first page alone. Now imagine that some pages are going to have more complex flows and more pages. That's a lot. If we don't use consistent components across board, imagine that I have to change something. It means I have to go into each and every single one of those components on each and every single one of those pages to change them. That's hell. Nobody wants to do that. So please, whenever you're designing a product, even if it's a website that does not have as many pages, right, be consistent in your use of elements. Have a system, right? Have a system. So you can just take components from that system and use across board. That way it's going to be easier when you're handing off to them because the documentation would already be there. You only need to chip in when they have some minor questions. And then last but not least, we have usability testing and use it analytics report, right? Just think about this as your feedback process after you've launched your product or after you're done with your product, right? You want to understand if people actually, if the app is working for people, and if people are actually using it the way it's intended, the way you envisioned, right? This is sometimes the part where people send out feedback, right? And then send out surveys, right, to ask you for feedback, and then they get feedback, and then they actually work on those feedback. Do you understand? But basically, a UX designer's job or a product designer's job is never done. It's if anybody tells you that the job is never done, it's a lie. Especially when you're part of the team, when you're an integral part of the team, it's never done, right? So you after the product is done, after you've handed off to devs, right? Devs are going to work on it, but even after they've worked on it, you will still be needed, right? Because they will launch the product and then there will be feedback. So you need to be able to actually test for these things. You need to be able to gather this feedback and work with them. So these people, or for instance, maybe the devs are telling you that, oh, we have 3 options for these people, but they are mostly selecting the 3rd option, and we want them to select more of the 2nd option. What do we do? So maybe you now start looking at how you design those options again. You're like, okay, maybe the 3rd one is looking more attractive than the rest. Let's try this. Let's switch their positions. Let's put this middle one here and that one here, and let's see what happens, right? And then maybe you test it out and you're seeing that, oh, people are sticking with their initial choices, and you have to decide that, okay, maybe it's because what we're offering here is different than what we're offering there. But just keep at the back of your mind that your job as a product designer is not restricted to design alone. Like, that's what you need to understand there. I've been on multiple strategy calls. You might think that, oh, strategy, stakeholders, now strategy, PMs, it's a lie, right? So you have to be there, because once you understand what the team is trying to accomplish, right, you will be able to actually give them solutions that can be designed, solutions that can work. Because stakeholders can tell you that they want to bring down heaven on earth, or they want to change the color of Mars, right? The question is, bro, how do you intend to do that? That's not feasible. What I can tell you is, if you want to change the color of Mars, you can get a very, very powerful camera that can go deep into space, take a picture of Mars, come to Photoshop, change it, right? And share to the public that that's the changed version of Mars. But you cannot realistically change the color of, planet Mars. Do you understand? So it's when you understand the scope, you cannot even bring them back to order. If they are going too far abroad, bro, it's not going to work like that. Let's do this instead. This is not feasible. And you give them tangible reasons to do so. Sometimes designers get frustrated when they tell stakeholders that this is not possible, and stakeholder is telling them that why, and then they are like, it's just not possible. And the stakeholder tells you that if you are saying it's not just possible, then I don't trust that, I don't believe that, I'm not listening to that. And then they come back and then they're angry. They're like, oh, my stakeholder is stubborn. I told you, the stakeholder is not stubborn, right? It's you. Like, you're not giving them actual tangible reasons. This guys brought together a team to work on an idea they've envisaged for only God knows how long. And then you're coming to tell them that, oh, let's not do it like this without a tangible reason. And they are paying you to do that work. No, it doesn't work that way. Right. So testing is very, very important. Testing is very, very important. You need to be able to gather this data, right, and use them to reimagine the cycle as the need arises. All right. Yeah. So these are the 10 UX deliverables that we're going to be covering. Yeah. If you have any questions or comments, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you can ask them. But yeah, we are pretty much done with this. And you guys are also going to get the slides, a more detailed slide. So don't worry about that. But yes, thank you very much for listening. Let me stop sharing now. I'm going to take questions for the next like 10 minutes. So if you have any, just raise up your hands and let's take a couple. And if you don't, I'm going to assume that the class was just so simple and easy to understand that you guys don't have any questions. Okay, that's very interesting. All right. So in the absence of questions, we are going to end this. All right. And we're going to end this. And yeah, you're definitely going to be getting the assignment for this particular part of the course very soon. And very quickly, let me touch on the update on Slack. It was brought to our attention that some of the question 15 and 16 of the assignment don't have correct answers. So right now, whether or not you think the answers are correct, just choose one. We're going to give you those ones as bonuses, right? But technically, there is there is a correct or there are correct answers, but just to remove any form of confusions, right? Don't worry about 15 and 16. Don't skip them. You have to choose an option for each of them, right? But you get them as bonuses. Do you understand? Yes, thank you very much for your time. It was awesome talking to you once again. Cheers, guys.